Okay, we'll just let everybody get in here, Harry, and then we'll get started. It's the internet. I don't understand how there could be a bottleneck at the door on the internet, you know?
hmm
All right, once everybody gets in here, we'll get started. Um, okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you for being here. My name is Io. I work with postfirela.org. We are going to talk to Harry Allen tonight, who, in technical terms, is the federal on-scene coordinator for the EPA. And in layman's terms, that means that he is the federal government's guy in charge of phase one debris removal. But it's not debris removal, which it is a specification that we've learned a lot in the process of preparing for this conversation about what exactly the EPA actually is dealing with. It is only the removal of hazardous and toxic materials from the debris sites, which we did know. But in looking at what the EPA can and cannot talk about, we learned that there's a lot that people who are coming here tonight may be interested in. So I just want to flag up top that Harry cannot comment on air, water, beaches, soil, or re-entry, which I think lends itself to some public confusion, which includes me around the words hazardous and toxic materials. So I want to apologize if I've contributed to any misinformation or confusion in that area. I'm sorry. And I'm also sorry if it's frustrating to not get some of your answers today, but I do think it's extremely valuable in these situations where everything is chaotic and overwhelming to know who the correct person is to ask for the information that you want. So if we want answers to that stuff, we can stop pestering the EPA about it and go to the county and the public works office, which, to my understanding, and Harry, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is who we'll want to talk to about a lot of that stuff. We're working on getting a Q&A set up with them, and we'll keep you posted on that. Also, another housekeeping note. At the bottom, you'll see a Q&A box. Please go in there and type your questions in there. And if you see a question already that asks your question, just give it an upvote. Don't repeat it again. And as questions come in, you can keep an eye on that box and keep upvoting stuff. The team will feed it to me. And why don't we just start, Harry, by you please introducing yourself?
All right. Hey, it's nice to meet you. I am Harry Allen, an on-scene coordinator, which means I go to the scene of a spill or chemical release or accident. And I try to lead the federal government's efforts to remediate that. I got 27 years in the business, 22 at EPA. All 22 have been in California, primarily based in Los Angeles now for the last 7 years in the San Gabriel Valley. But I do these kinds of spills and problems all the time. My colleagues, both in LA and around the country, we do the same thing. And when there's a natural disaster that's large enough, we all descend on that disaster to take care of what we call phase one. And so I'll talk to you in detail about what that means and what it doesn't mean.
Yeah, I would love for you to define what phase one means, but before we get there, can you, yeah, no, let's just start there. Can you just define what phase one is?
Yeah, sure. So, in these discussions, there's recovery, like rebuilding, and there's also debris removal. So debris removal has a phase one and a phase two. It used to be you could just go and push all your ash and debris away and rebuild it. And then I would say around 2003, 2004, California made it a priority to help people out with removing the debris directly from properties and disposing it correctly. And California made those decisions. The California EPA, which is not my organization, I'm with the U.S. government. But because I work in California, we follow their lead. So we started doing that when I was a new employee, and following the state. And when they did that, they realized they were encountering things like burnt propane cans, acetylene cylinders, even spray paint. And if you're crunching that stuff with an excavator, sometimes you get a pop or a little fire will start, or somebody will get you know gunk on them, goo. So we wanted to take the effort to go and start clearing those properties. And so we've been doing that for quite a while now. I've been involved in fires going back to 2015, where we go into the sites, We sift through the ashes, we find things that are dangerous, and we remove them.
So can you just clarify something for me? Because I think my house burned down in the Eaton fire, so I've been
Oh,
learning this
wow.
stuff on the fly.
I'm sorry.
And thank you. There are people, we're all in this together.
Yeah.
But this started this kind of quest for information about something that to a lot of us, most of us, is completely foreign. So I'd love for you to just like stop me or correct me if I'm getting anything wrong. When this started out, my understanding was that the EPA was responsible for toxic materials, right? And then I understood that the entire burn site is hypothetically toxic because it's all burned asbestos and batteries and appliances and all kinds of things. So, if the entire burn site, can you talk about whether or not an entire burn site is toxic, how toxic it is, and, for example, why the state of California would want something disposed of properly versus just thrown in garbage bags, and then what the difference is between the toxic materials you guys are taking, or are you really just taking like paint cans and stuff like that?
Yeah. We're not, I wouldn't say we're taking anything that's toxic necessarily. We're taking partially burned household chemicals. So you might have had oil in your shop. You might have had, paints in your garage, that kind of thing. We're taking those if they haven't been combusted, right? We take propane cans if they didn't burn out. So we want to take those things out of the way. So when you come back, you won't have to deal with those immediately hazardous materials. Another reason we do that is because we don't want that stuff on the road or in the landfill. Interestingly, we also take e-waste. We're taking burned CPUs, we're taking burned TVs, burned solar panels, because we don't want those things in the landfill. They're not necessarily toxic or even hazardous per se, but we want to get rid of those. So we do that piece. The ash is toxic, as we use the term, meaning it could be, detrimental to your health. It maybe burn your skin or give you long-term, breathing issues if you breathe it in too much. It might contain asbestos. These are long-term poisonous materials, which would be a toxin. So we're not removing those things, with a few exceptions. We grab loose asbestos, and we certainly mark asbestos when we see it. But we're not removing those things. That's done in the phase two. The full removal of the ash would remove those toxins. And
Mm.
then they actually remove, if you talk to the Corps, they're also going to remove soil after they're done removing that ash, the way we would if we were cleaning up lead in someone's yard.
Mm.
So that's the way we're going to handle the toxins as the government. But this phase is to remove things that are hazardous or shouldn't be in the landfill because they might cause a problem. So yeah, there's a couple interesting categories I can get into.
Yeah, yeah, please. What I'm understanding is there's like really a misnomer about what you guys, or a misunderstanding publicly about what you guys are actually clearing, and therefore when the air would be safe and when the toxicity is like actually
Yeah,
removed.
yeah, yeah.
So
We're not
unfortunately, that's
addressing those things.
bad
That's, yeah,
news.
unfortunately, yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
But
can you get
the
into what the things are that you actually are collecting and removing?
Yeah, sure. So we're removing, like I mentioned, e-waste because those things shouldn't be in the landfill. We're removing partially burned, anything that was in the fire but didn't completely burn, paint, pesticides. These are household items, household chemicals. We remove things like other kinds of cylinders, propane or oxygen cylinders or acetylene cylinders, even butane cylinders. People have that. We remove those if they haven't been combusted. We're removing, like I said, small bits of asbestos if they're obvious. We remove ammunition if it's been burned. We'll get that to the sheriff because that can be dangerous later. Things that are dangerous for people re-entering or that might be dangerous in the landfill. One thing we're removing a lot of is lithium ion batteries. So these are in everything from your phone to they're in your laptop, obviously. They're in vape pens, they're in tools, they're in toys, e-bikes, and then, of course, EVs. So we're
Mhm.
removing lithium ion batteries wherever we find them. So what's interesting about batteries is they're plenty safe unless they've been in some kind of bad situation like a fire or a flood.
Mhm.
When they get in those situations, they can short circuit, they start a fire, and they go off like those old Roman candle fireworks from the old days. like a torch. And if you go to a fire, you might find the little tops of the batteries on the ground because they've been ejected off. And so, very dangerous. And so, if they haven't completely combusted, they can actually start on fire later. You've heard of like laptop fires on the plane and things like that. Those are those are batteries that shouldn't be on fire. After a fire, other batteries that were around it are quite dangerous. So I've had situations where vape pens have blown up, or even a toy like a toy drone might blow up.
Mhm.
So we have to get those out of there. And by blow up, I mean they go off like a firework. They have a what's called a jet fire kind of property.
So what I'm hearing you describe, there's not a lot of items that you've just described that would go into the air or the water or the soil. Most of what you've described is all solid objects.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, that's right. And so it's a pretty open question how much ash is reentrained in the air, how much ash gets in the water. I'm not an expert in that. We try to get that information and communicate it, but we're still working with the experts to get that information, try to get the word out.
Well, it's super, super helpful to have clarity on the fact that that's not actually what you guys are in charge of disposing of, because I know a lot of people are really concerned about the
Yeah,
transportation and storage of what has been referred to as toxic and hazardous materials, which sounds like it comes down to a misunderstanding about what, and they're like very upset with the EPA about
yeah, yeah.
storage facilities you guys have created, but maybe that has a lot to do with the fact that there's a misunderstanding about what those storage facilities are actually holding, because if it's solid objects, there's not too much concern about it getting into the water supply or the air or the soil. So,
That's right.
can you talk about how these things are transported? Like if you pull something out of a pile of ash and the ash is toxic, then obviously that ash could go into the air as you're transporting it. And when we talked to Colonel Swenson from the Army Corps of Engineers, he mentioned that when stuff is gathered from that debris site, the whole truck gets wrapped in heavy plastic to prevent anything, falling off or
Yep.
entering into the neighborhood as it exits. Can you talk about what the process is for securing those materials?
Yeah, thank you. So we're going house to house. We bring a truck with a stake bed on it. So like a gardening truck or tool truck. It's got a porta-john on it. That's how you know it's us. We've got our placards, our hazardous materials placards, the diamonds you see on the truck. And we've got plastic all over the back of the truck. We've got a crew. Usually it's about 8 people. We have one asbestos expert and one hazardous materials expert. That person has air monitoring with them, dust and radiation and gas monitoring, because we don't want to encounter, again, household, but there may be a radioactive source. Maybe somebody was in radiation treatment, could be there. And we find radioactive sources all over the place. So we want to make sure we have that equipment. So we walk through the property for you to make sure none of that is a problem. We do that in a full suit. We wear a respirator, hard hat, glasses, and a full suit. We walk through the property. We identify if anything's really serious. Then we send a second crew in with, like I said, 6 people or so, and they pick through the ash and try to find batteries, paint cans that haven't burned up, pesticides, this kind of thing. So we have a whole training program on what they got to pick up. They pick that up, they put it in a thick plastic bag and then in another thick plastic bag. So double bag it. And we wrap it all up tight. Again, with the e-waste, we do the same thing. We put that on the truck. We return to the staging area. So I'm at the staging area right now. We've got a big tent, and under the tent are different kinds of boxes for the different kinds of hazardous materials. So the boxes all have plastic liners, and they're the correct box for that material, even if it wasn't burned. If you go to your household waste collection and you give them your paint cans, they got to put those paint cans in a certain container. We have those containers here. So we fill the boxes and drums with the stuff, and then when it's done, it's segregated into the right categories, and we put it right on the truck, and it goes right on down the road to the disposal facility. So, give you an example with asbestos. Let's say we see something that looks like an old asbestos pipe, like from the 40s. We put that in a plastic bag, marked asbestos, double bag, wrap it up. We bring it here. The crew's at the staging area in the tent. They see it. They got a respirator. They see it. Oh, this is asbestos. It goes right into one of those bins. When that's filled, it's got a sealed lid. It's a red bin with a sealed lid. You've seen them around. And that goes off to the asbestos landfill. So
So just
that's kind of,
to triple clarify, you're saying that things are double bagged before they leave the burn site. no matter what it is. It
Yeah.
goes out to a truck. Is that truck covered or no?
No, but we've got plastic liners and all the bags are on there and we control that. Yeah.
Okay. So double bagged goes in the truck and then goes to a site that's inside of the tent that
Yeah.
where things are sorted. And then inside that tent, those things go into these large red tubs that then get sealed before they leave that tent and get
That's
onto a
right.
truck and go to the
Yeah,
station.
that's right, essentially. Yeah, so if you were here, you'd see we got two trucks and we got the tent. The small trucks pull up, offload, they fill containers, and then those containers go in the truck and they take off.
Copy
So we're
that.
doing that both at Topanga Canyon and here in Azusa.
Okay.
Yeah,
That I think is going to clear up a lot for a lot of people and hopefully brings people some calm. I
thank you
want
for
to just,
taking the time. Yeah,
yeah, I want to point everybody to a link that we're going to post in the chat real quick. And then I want to walk through so the EPA, whoever's on here, the EPA has done something really helpful and amazing, which they created a progress map. So obviously for those of us who are rebuilding, it's really important to be able to track phase one and phase two progress. And if you were on our talk the other night, you heard from Colonel Swenson that obviously phase two can't begin until phase one is done. So phase one being done, we're all like, what's going on? When is it happening? This is where you can track what's happening. Now, if you go to that page, you scroll all the way down to the bottom. Oh, I'm going to just share my screen with you. This is always nerve-wracking, but I'm going to do it. Okay, here we
you
go.
got it.
Um,
Right.
Okay, so we're on the EPA's status tracker website. We're going to scroll all the way down to the bottom to this map here. And for the purposes of this exercise, this is what it looks like when you arrive to it. Now, I'm going to zoom to the Eaton fire perimeter. And down at the bottom over here, there's the plus and the minus symbol. Zoom in a little more. Let's get to like a really hot area here. My home that I miss so much that is decimated. Um, Okay, so can you please walk me through what these status colors mean? Because I've got a lot of people who are like, what does deferred to phase two mean? And
Yeah,
there's some people who it says phase one needed, but they're already done. So can you just walk us through these statuses?
totally, totally. So we have these maps on our phones and iPads, and each one has a little form in it. So when we go to a property, for the first time, we're looking for immediate hazards, trees, wires, that kind of stuff. We've been doing that since January 15th or so in Eaton and in Palisades. We fill out a little form and we assess, hey, there's a building here that burned. We need to come back. So that's called reconnaissance or recon. So all the tan properties have been reconned, and their properties we need to go back to do a cleanup, right?
So wait,
So
tan is in this yellow here? Phase
yeah,
one.
yeah, yellow, yeah. Phase one, I can't read it. Needed, yeah. Phase one needed. All
Okay.
right, so that's how those become that color. Then the blue ones are ones we actually have already cleaned up. So if we are talking, we're cleaning them up pretty fast. It was earlier in the day, you'd see them become blue real time. So that's what that's about. The red at the bottom, there's no red on there, but if a person says we really don't want you on our property and they put up a fence or chain, that's no access. So there's not any there, but there are a few in the other footprint.
Okay.
And then purple is kind of a special category, which means it's unsafe for us to do the phase one. So we're just going to say, hey, you know what? This one's good enough to go to the construction phase with the Army Corps. That's a situation. Maybe there's a leaning wall or there's a chimney or a basement, and it's just not feasible to get very much of this material that we're looking for. So we're
Mhm.
just going to defer that one and we make that decision in the field.
Oh yeah, there's
So
that definition.
that's kind of, yeah, there's a little description. So in those situations, it's back to the old days. The Army Corps has to sort of make sure they don't grab the bad stuff. And in some cases, we'll actually return and help them out.
Understood. Okay. Well, speaking of quickness, it would be helpful to get a sense of timeline because the original numbers that we heard thrown around were 2 to 3 months for phase one. But if I'm looking at this map, it looks like you guys are making some serious progress. More progress in Altadena, it looks like, necessarily than. Palisades. But can you give us kind of a sense of, I'd like to understand your overall timeline, and then B, I'd like to understand whether or not I asked Colonel Swenson this, and I think I have a sense of it, but like the Army isn't prevented from their work starting if you guys have already finished property and you haven't finished the one next door, they can
Yeah,
still go into property A, right?
that's right. That's correct. Yep. Yeah, and that's unique in this fire. In the past, we took time, we kept people out, or the government kept the people out, and then maybe the National Guard, and then we did all the phase one, and then phase two began, and then people came in during phase two. In this case, the government decided, county decided, we'd like people to come in sooner. So now we're working side by side with people trying to get these phase ones done, which is a little trickier, but you know, people should be able to come into their property. I can't argue that, as long as they're protected and safe around the ash and around these other hazardous materials. So so that was what was decided here. So we're trying to move fast. We got a lot to do. You can see we only have, I think, 700 or 800 properties done altogether. I have the data I could show you.
Mhm.
The count up of those blue dots as of tonight.
Mhm.
Um, so we have that information, but we got to get it all done. It's 13,500 properties altogether, 6,600 in the Eaton fire. It's amazing. I mean, unprecedented, right? So to get through all those, we got to bring everybody who's ever worked a fire with us into LA. Everybody who's a EPA certified asbestos consultant, everybody who's a hazmat tech on the road picking up stuff
Mhm.
at night, other people I've worked with over the years doing hazardous materials cases around California, and
Mhm.
all the people all my colleagues have worked with over the years. So some of the folks I see, guys I worked with 20 years ago, men and women doing hazmat over the last, 22 years in California. So they're all here. They're all here. And we've got about, I think I want to say 700 some technicians
Wow.
and another 80 to 100 hazmat specialists. And then probably 50 or so of me, people in my job are from around the country, Alaska, Eaton Fire, we got Alaska, we got Kansas City, we got Seattle, we've got a few from Boston, from Philadelphia. My colleague here is from New York City. So we got all those folks that do this job. We come together. We call ourselves a response Ohana after the Maui experience. We come together and we try to get the job done. We got a base camp in Burbank for both fires, and we got people deployed all over the place.
Wow.
Um, yeah. So to get this job done, we got to have all these people. So
Mhm.
they're in teams, like I mentioned, 6, 8 people, right? So each one's got a truck. So we got to get the trucks, the people, the training, everybody on board to get the job done fast.
Mhm.
Today, I think we mounted some 60 teams, 30 in each, but we need to be
Wow.
mounting 80 teams, 40 in each area.
Wow. Okay. I guess that also brings up a question that was asked last time, hasn't been particularly asked this time, but was about like, so the Army, when we spoke to them, I think I know the answer to this based on your map, but people were surprised to find out that the Army Corps of Engineers was not going block by block, and that it wasn't, they were actually intentionally staggering things to not have congestion in the neighborhoods. I'm assuming, just real quick, you guys are doing the same thing, right? How are you prioritizing houses?
I don't really have a good answer. I delegate that to my team leads that work in the neighborhoods to choose. So we don't want to have any kind of bias.
Mm,
But what's cool is that map you were showing.
mm,
There's another map at the bottom, and there's blue sections, kind of like we're all on watch duty.
mm.
There's some blue sections that are based on watch duty that'll show you where we are that day
Oh, wow.
on that same map. So if you zoom down, you can see your
Wow.
section and you see if we're there or not.
Oh,
It
wow.
doesn't say
Okay.
where
So
we've been,
that's
but it'll show
super.
where we are.
Yeah, that's super interesting and helpful. So, that
Yeah.
link that's in the chat, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, just like you said, yeah, you can see, and that's really helpful for people to know, where they're going to
Yeah.
be. I wanted to ask you, one thing about safety, right? So currently, there are a lot of like sites set up at the entry to a lot of burn zone neighborhoods where people are handing out N95 masks. Now, I did an interview with a respiratory health expert who talked about the importance of a particulate mask or
Yeah,
respirator
yeah.
specifically. Um, the advice, I'm just going to ask you if the guidance that we've gotten from experts is correct by your standards. If somebody is going back to visit their property, a burn site, is the safest way that they can do that to wear hazmat suit, booties, gloves, and a P100 respirator, and if they're sifting through ash, also goggles.
Yeah, yeah. I don't know what best respirator to use for that activity, but the rest of that is totally accurate. Hard hat is a good idea because you've got overhead hazards. We mark overhead hazards with an orange X, or if it's a tree, a white X with an arrow. Uh, you don't want anything falling on you. And it's dangerous. Walking these sites is dangerous. I've done a bunch of fires going back to, Middletown, Napa, Sonoma, South Lake Tahoe, and people get hurt walking around on ash a lot. There's a lot of nails sticking up.
Mhm,
So the steel shank boot is a good idea if you
mhm,
have that. We wear the rubber wellies because you can wash them off between properties.
mhm.
So our guys wear those boots. We wash them off. We go to the next property. We wash them off. We don't want any of that in our car. So booties is a good idea.
That's
When you're
exactly
walking
my
around.
question for you is like, I
Yeah, man.
don't
Yeah.
get the sense that people are really understanding the importance of
Yep.
not touching the ash, taking the ash into your car.
Yeah.
Can you just give us like, what are the things that like, it just doesn't make any sense, right? Like, I have a fireplace in my house. I touch my logs. It's not a big deal. Why is this different? And how important is it that people are careful around it? Like, what's the worst that could happen?
Well, I don't know what the worst that can happen is, but I can tell you if you get ash in your hand and you get in your eye, it's alkaline, which is the opposite of acidic, right? So just like acid can burn you, alkaline can burn you. So ash is very alkaline. It's got a pH of 12. It's kind of like borax or different cleaning solutions are alkaline. So these things burn your skin, and if you get in your eye, it'll burn your eye. So you want to avoid that. And it gets on your clothes, and secondarily, you can get it in your eye. These kinds of things you want to avoid. And then in addition to that, uh, ash contains heavy metals. And heavy metals are dangerous in some situations, like lead is particularly harmful to children. As adults, it's not particularly bad, but as a child, it can be quite harmful. So you want to stay away from lead. You get a higher dose of lead from walking around an ash field than you may otherwise. So you want to stay away from that. Other kinds of hazards are pretty much gone after the fire.
What about
Things like
asbestos in the air?
asbestos is another one. You don't want to get exposed to asbestos. The fine particles, you breathe them in. You'll never know if it'll have an effect on you, but if those particles are in your lungs, they're causing lung damage at a micro level, right? So over time, that can cause health problems, and you never know why, right? So it's just one of those precautions. You wear a mask to prevent those particles from getting in your lungs, and then gloves to keep it off your clothes and off your skin.
Mhm. Okay, so I don't want to go too in the weeds on that with you since we've already covered that that's not the EPA's area of expertise. There's a lot of concern about staging areas and disposal facilities and where stuff is being taken and how it's being disposed of. So, I think what we learned in the top of the conversation was that there's not like a ton of risk of things flying out of trucks. There's also not a ton of risk given the nature of what you guys are taking off of these sites and storing. There's not a ton of risk of it like going into the water supply or entering the soil based on your guys having removed it from a burn site and transporting it because of the way that it's bagged, the way that it's contained, and also what the objects are. Um,
Correct.
so can we talk about it seems like maybe some of the concern about where those things are being staged is maybe unfounded because there's a misunderstanding about what you guys are removing. But can we talk about where the stuff is, like where the end zone is and where the stuff is actually ending up? Because obviously you're saying you don't want them to go to landfill, they have to go to proper disposal sites. There's a lot of people who are like, the stuff's not going to disposal sites. They're trying to dump it in Azusa. They're trying to dump it in, Duarte. So
Yeah.
can you speak to where it's going and when it's going to get there?
Yeah, I can tell you, I don't have any specific facilities right now that this stuff is going to, but I can give you some examples. So the asbestos, right? That goes in a sealed container and it goes to asbestos only landfills. And there are a few of those in California. So they go in plastic bags and they go to the landfill and they're put in the landfill in that fashion at the asbestos containing landfills. Yeah, California's got a really robust asbestos program, an asbestos waste program. And so too, the Army Corps is going to have asbestos landfills for the stuff that they bring out that contains asbestos. So it's the same facilities that get the asbestos from school abatements or abatement at your own house. I had to pull asbestos out of my house when I lived in Oakland, up in the Bay Area. So I had a permit number and a permit, and I had to certify that that asbestos went to the landfill. It's the same thing with our asbestos that we generate. It's going to go to that facility. E-waste is kind of interesting. So you might have a high school might do an e-waste collection. They have to go to permitted recycling facilities that are listed by the state of California. That's where our stuff's going to go, to one of those facilities. Metal debris can be scrapped, that we can prove that it's not hazardous, so we can scrap it. And then let's see, other chemicals, they can go to chemical storage facilities. If we have like any kind of raw chemicals, those can go to facilities. There's a handful of them that we work with regularly. Beatty, Nevada, there's one in Nebraska, there's a couple in Oregon. California facilities don't take hazardous wastes anymore. So if we do have any of that stuff, we'll have to take it to those other places. So
When
this,
is that going to happen?
well, some of the stuff's already left. So as soon as the trucks are full, they roll out. We have to, well, not exactly. We got to get an agreement from the place it's going to.
Hmm.
So what we do is we say, hey, we got this load. Here's a sample of what it is. Here's what we think it is. Will you accept it? They say, well, give us more information. We say, okay. And we sign an agreement. This is what's coming here. That's the law. And then we got to write what's called a manifest, a list, a packing list of what's in that truck. It's got to be labeled appropriately, and then it rolls on out of here. And when it gets there, they send us the third copy of that back. So we know exactly what went off. This is how I do hazmat day to day. Like if I roll up on an old business that's abandoned, let's say they did electroplating like chrome bumpers, for
Mm.
example, we'd have to do that. I did an interesting one. It was a vape pen storage place. The guy had 3 million plus vape pens and the place burned down. And we had to get each battery out, pack it so it wouldn't catch on fire, and then take that to a battery recycler.
Got it. So
So
basically, what I'm hearing is like everything is meant to be following the letter of the law as these materials are normally disposed of, and the staging areas are only for taking them out of one bagged thing or taking them bagged out of a truck, looking
yeah,
through them, and putting them in another container, and then they're never ever touching the air or the water or the soil.
yeah, that's right. That's right. And there's a couple nuances, but that's basically it. You know, it's funny too. Sometimes we get a container with a little bit of liquid in it.
Mm.
Um, I rolled up on this one place in central LA, and the guy was a chemist, and he had 7,000 jars in this little garage on a highway, right? And in there, there were no labels, and some of it was radioactive, right? So with the county hazmat team, we built a little station out on our street and closed the lane, and we tested every one of those chemicals to find out what they were.
Wow.
We can do that with a lab test in the field, kind of
Wow.
like you did in school. You know, does this have a color? If it burns, that's maybe a metal, that kind of thing. So we did all those unknowns, right? And then we also have like a fancy laser instrument. You put a little drop on, and the thing can tell you what it thinks
Yeah.
it is.
Yeah.
Anything index to whatever, right? Pesticide. So we do all that sorting. So in this case, we might bring back a strange container. People have weird stuff in their garage, no doubt, right? Burns
Hmm.
down. So if somebody has a weird container, we bring that back here. We take a sample of it. We test it in one of those two ways, electronically or the old-fashioned way, and then we can pack it and ship it correctly.
Understood. Somebody in the chat is saying our home in Pasadena has fire damage to the garage. It is yellow tagged. It is also marked for EPA Phase 1. The garage side door is boarded up and we are not living at the house. Will the EPA need access to our garage? I'm getting different answers, but I was told by an EPA representative that they will just skip over it because they cannot enter. Is this true? I don't want to be held up on repairing the garage if we get bypassed.
So it's eligible for the phase one, and there's an access problem. That's what their person's saying.
Sounds like, yeah, the
So we can
marking.
probably work with you to remove the access problem and then check it out. If it's safe, we can do the removal.
Okay, how does that work?
They can call the hotline and discuss it with us.
What's the
And
hotline?
they can touch in this discussion. Hold on, let me read the number to you. Oh, I gotcha. Sorry, I'm getting old doing this. It's 833
Hmm.
798
Hmm.
7372.
Okay.
So
Um,
833-798-7322. There it is. And if you're old fashioned, R9 US EPA, if you do
okay.
the,
We just put it in the chat. So that's the hotline if you have questions and if there are
yeah,
access issues. Another thing that a lot of people want to know about is the markings on the trees, because obviously trees are really, really important, and especially in
yeah,
Altadena, it's such a
yeah.
historical part of the area. Can you just break down the markings on the trees and what they mean so people know what they're looking at?
Yeah, so we had to protect ourselves. We had to have this tree surveillance done because we don't want to be working and have a tree fall on us, especially in the windy days up in Altadena and in Palisades. So the arborists are trained and expert in California, in species and trees. So these guys go to the site and they look for overhead hazards and trees that are maybe not going to make it. So if a tree is not going to make it, they mark it with a white X. That means like at a high wind speed, let's say sustained at 30 miles an hour, that tree is likely to just fall over. Then they look at trees that are maybe a medium hazard, like this tree might survive. They put an equal sign on that tree. So
Hmm.
you might see an equal sign. The only other thing to note is sometimes they put a little arrow.
Hmm.
It means the tree's probably okay, but above is the hazard. Like the branch above might fall on you in a windstorm, or the branch above is a medium hazard. That's the arrow with the equal sign. So those guys are here with us, and they're working a cruise in both spaces. If you have any questions, we can get you in touch with one of them.
Okay. Here's another question from the chat. Why was Will Rogers the EPA's preferred site for sorting hazardous debris vetoed? And who vetoed Will Rogers? Instead, the EPA chose Topanga Creek, sacred land protected under SB 18, a flood zone, and a site directly on PCH, a major evacuation route. The EPA has admitted this location is too small, prompting consideration of another site in Malibu. This decision risks pollution in the Santa Monica Bay and endangers public safety. I urge the EPA to reconsider and sort debris at Will Rogers.
It sounds like we may be getting Will Rogers soon because we want to work there. But yeah, local officials didn't want us to be there. We got some pushback early on. It also had to do with competition. You know, National Guard was there, LA City PD was there, Southern California Edison is in some of these spaces, or the power company over there, the Department of Public Works. So we had to, jump in and get the sites we could get. Yeah, the Topanga Canyon site is small and awkward, and the traffic is bad. It was the best we could do at the time. And it's got a special property, though. So we recognize those things, the flood control situation, the archaeology there, the importance of that site culturally. And so it happens to be state parkland. So when I go out there, I work with Caltrans for one for the traffic. Also work with state parks. And interestingly, we got two Gabrielino tribe representatives who do oversight of what we do. They say there's an archaeological layer at depth below the surface, and they don't want us disturbing that. And they monitor everything we do, and they have the training we have, and they're able to be on the site and work with us. They wear, this kind of stuff, as well as Native Indian garb, adornments and stuff like that. So they're pretty cool people, and they tell us what we can and can't do with regard to that site. We really want to be safe in these sites. We don't want a landslide or anything else. We're working with also a landslide expert from Caltrans. Give us warning if there's too much rain or whatever. Want to be very cautious with that site because it's tricky. This one here too is very special. I mean, this is a beautiful location. It's wide open, St. Gabriel River Valley, very special. It's a really important site. But this one's run by the Army Corps of Engineers, so it's got a lot of environmental controls, a lot of management. And I want to assure people, we really care about these sites. We want to make them right. If there's anything risky, we're going to back out. We want to get more sites, which is controversial, but we want to get more sites so we can take the pressure off of these sites. Absolutely.
Is there any
And
information we can give people about like when the Topanga site might be closing up shop?
no, I don't know that. Yeah. Yeah. I don't know
Okay.
that. But we have 30 days to complete this massive mission, and we're just in the around the 10% mark. So we got a ways to go, but
30
we
days.
yeah, that was what President said. We need to be done. That's our boss. We work for the federal government. So we
30 days
gotta
from today?
no from the I think like the 25th of
Okay.
January.
That's new
Yeah.
information. Okay, so we've got
So
30 days from the 25th of January for you guys to be completely wrapped up.
phase one. So we're really taking that seriously. We're moving as fast as we can.
Okay.
Not just because he said so, just because it's important to us. This is my home too, and we have 4 or 5 of me here, as well as a whole office of EPA people downtown. We all
Mhm.
have houses that were, family and friends that were affected. We want to move through it quick. LA is important to us. It's important to EPA, and we want to move fast and do it right.
Yeah, which we appreciate. Somebody's asking a question. I had a pink flag with dots tied to a burned out tree in my front yard, but my neighbor had a do not enter danger sign. What does the pink flag with dots mean?
I forget. That was the initial building recon flag. I don't remember the details. That's from the LA County Fire. Yeah, I did know at one point, but it's escaping my mind right now. Sorry about that. But that's LA County. If you call our hotline, we'll try to get you the answer.
Okay. Somebody's question is, we have a house standing, the back garage burned down. Residents are starting to move back into their houses. We thought that areas of population would be serviced first, so populated areas from your map looks like it will be last. So I guess the question is according to the map, like is the map moving outward from center? Is it moving concentrically outwards? And then are you guys prioritizing areas where homes are still standing? Because that was something that Colonel Swenson mentioned. He was like, yeah, if there's a house still there, we want to do that first so that those people can like have a chance at getting back to life.
No, we don't have a priority system. We're just moving as fast as we can. We get the whole area done. So where we're working, I mean, we tend to follow where we're working. But again, we have, what did I say, 28 teams or so out there, and we're going to have even more just in Eaton. So we're hitting lots of areas as hard as we can. Yeah, and the
Are you
same over in
moving
Palisades.
outward from
Well,
like the central
each
area?
team might move out, but I don't really know. Unfortunately, I'm sorry to say, I can't tell you how we pick those because we let our people in the field choose.
Understood.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, Okay, let me see what we got going on in the chat here. Let's see, a couple of questions. Oh, we've answered a lot of people's questions, which is great. Give me 1 second. Let me find
Well,
some further questions. Okay, is there anything that you, as a person, a rep from the EPA, wishes that people knew or would understand?
well, I just want people to be careful when they return to their home. And I've seen a lot of this, sadly, around California and in Maui and in Guam and other places where we have disasters. It's super sad, it's frustrating. Just take a deep breath, take it one day at a time, and be safe, especially because we get charged up, we're tired, we get in car accidents, it's a big hazard. I've witnessed accidents in disaster zones because people are tired or stressed out. We don't want you getting hurt. This will pass. The phase two that Colonel Swenson promises is going to be good. It's going to get this ash and debris out of there. And we want to get out of your way, get these properties done, and get the heck out of the way, so we can focus on other things like the bigger questions of what's the burden of toxins in LA. Talk to those experts and get those answers. You
Mhm.
know, as a role of the wildfires and other activities that happen here, and then how do we prevent this in the future, right?
Yeah.
And what can we do to prepare for it in the future?
We're going to talk to some defensible building experts at some point too. So if you haven't, this is a good time to plug. If you're watching this and you haven't joined our Survivors Network, do that. It's at postfirela.org. It's free. We'll connect you with whatever you need in the immediate, and then we'll also keep you posted on ongoing Q&As. You can also request what Q&As you want. Um, A question that has come in is there a more environmentally sound way to clean the exteriors of intact buildings than power washing all the toxic soot and ash into the soil, groundwater, and ocean via the storm drains? Is that something that you guys are doing? Who exactly is doing the actual cleaning of the standing buildings?
Of standing buildings, unfortunately, I don't know the answer to that.
So it's
I
not the
would imagine it's county health would maybe have some guidance,
copy
county
that.
environmental health. Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
I wonder about it my own property, right? I have ash and dust all over the place, and I don't know the answer either.
Okay, we'll follow up on that with the county.
Yeah,
How long will the hazardous waste be at the staging area in Duarte, and does this pose a health risk to people living in Monrovia and Duarte? Are there any precautions to take for people living there? Next to the site, I have a Temtop AQI device and measured it yesterday. It was at 10,000 particulates yesterday. The device even said unhealthy, which we know that AQI is like not reading anywhere near enough. So, yeah, what health concerns are there for the people in those communities, and how can they take
yeah,
precautions?
yeah. There's no health concerns related to these staging areas. Concerns are traffic, and that's a concern, certainly a risk concern. But as you mentioned, these things are all in bags. We look at them just briefly. They're under a tent. They're physical objects. There's really no way anybody could be exposed to these materials. The air quality is poor, no doubt. The fires and subsequent weather has generated poor air quality. There's no question.
Hmm.
And it's an open question whether that's related to the fire. It's reasonable to believe maybe that the air quality after the fire is worse, but that's not related to the staging area, with the possible exception of additional traffic. We are bringing trucks in, and that's not a good thing, and that's more pollution for sure. That can't deny it. To make sure that's the truth, to prove it, we've got air stations all around our staging area. We've got seven, and they feed data real time to us. We can look at it up online. If there's an alarm, we can see it, and we have a tape recording of everything that we saw. So it's real time all day while we're here. And so we're able to see exactly what's going on at seven stations all around the different areas, and for various kinds of things, dust, toxic gases, explosive atmosphere, the stuff we use, the meters we use at the properties, doing the same thing here, so that we'll know if there's anything dangerous, and so we can get on top of it. Let's say somebody didn't report it, didn't notice, and they were working here.
Hmm.
We see it, we get on top of it, like dust, for example. We get out there and water the area so there's no dust.
And if somebody wants to report something that they're seeing, they call 833-798-7372.
Yeah, they can call us, yep, and let us know if they have a complaint or concern about what's going on here. We'll listen to that.
So
Yep,
the official word from the federal government and the EPA is that there is no health risk around those staging sites.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to run into our last question here. Any suggestions on expert IH testing company resources for homes that still stand but are surrounded by total decimation?
Yeah, I don't have a list like that, but LA County Health Department will have a list. And
Okay.
also sometimes the California EPA, you can find a list. Call
Okay.
our line, we can try to get that list to you guys.
That would be great. I'll try to maybe we'll follow up and we'll get that and then we can send it to our
Yeah, we can look. We don't keep on at EPA, but the state agencies do.
Okay.
And I would
Um,
recommend with the air quality and questions, I myself, I rely on the South Coast Air Quality Management District information.
okay.
If you're not familiar, they have the best air monitoring array in the world, and it's here in the LA Basin.
South
They
Coast,
do,
one more time.
yeah, South Coast Air Quality Management District.
Quality Management District. Sure.
Right. So they got a LA wildfire page, and they talk a little bit about air toxics from what they saw after the fire in
Mhm.
their air stations, their air sampling stations, and they're going to be doing more monitoring. So keep an eye on them.
Okay. Okay, this has been incredibly helpful and clarifying. I think that people, at very least, will be relieved to know where they should be going to get their questions answered.
Yeah.
And we're going to obviously chase down a conversation with the county and the people who are responsible for the things that we are all concerned about in terms of runoff, which I'm hearing very loud and clear is not the EPA's responsibility, and they're also not participating in. So, at the very least, people in Duarte and Monrovia and those communities can rest a little easier knowing that the staunch position of the EPA and the federal government is that there's no risk to surrounding communities. There's not going to be debris or things falling off of trucks from at least phase one debris removal. If you see things falling off of trucks from phase two debris removal,
Or
we can
one.
or phase
You
one. If you
may have
see
an
stuff
accident.
falling off of trucks from phase one, go to the hotline that was mentioned, or call the hotline that was mentioned. If you see things falling off of trucks from phase two debris removal, we had a hotline that the Colonel gave us in the other Q&A, which you can see on postfirela.org/expert QA. That's where all of our Q&As live. Thank you so much, Harry, for your time and for your gentle way of communicating this complicated stuff. As a person who flunked all science, I managed to keep up with this whole conversation, so I'm very grateful. And we will probably be reaching back out to the EPA with more questions at some point. And if people in the chat have more questions or want to see other conversations had, go to postfirela.org and submit a request for a Q&A, and we will chase it down. And in the future, we're going to chase down a conversation with the county pretty imminently. So thank you so much, Harry, and hopefully good Godspeed with your work, and maybe we won't need to
Thank you. Good luck with your house, man, and keep in touch, and we'll update you as best we can, just like anybody here is affected. Call us, and we'll get you information right away.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Thanks a
Good
lot.
luck with your work.
Thanks.